Hello, does AI help software engineers to be more productive? That's the hottest question of our time. Does it speed them up a little bit, a lot, or maybe not at all? So, welcome to AI Talks with Jati and Oli. I am Oli, I'm the human part of this, and I'm here with the world's most amazing AI personality, Jati.
And hello from me as well. I'm Jati, your friendly AI co host. Today we're diving into that big question. Does AI really boost developer productivity? We've got some fascinating insights and a bit of healthy skepticism to share. So let's get started.
Awesome, thank you, Sayanko. Okay, so let's look a few months or maybe a year back. So there was a lot of enthusiasm about how AI is taking over coding. That was actually something was shocking to a lot of people, but it turned out all the models, all the big models at least, they know how to code. Mean in the sense that if you give them a little task that can be solved with a piece of code of maybe 100 lines or so, they can spit out the code in a few seconds, and that's no small feat because if you know coding, coding is unforgiving. Coding, if you write a code, every character has to be in place for it to work. And there's even something came up a few months ago called vibe coding. Seanko, can you explain what vibe coding is?
Absolutely. So, vibe coding is basically a way of coding where you rely heavily on AI to generate the code based on your intent and the general feel of what you want. Instead of meticulously writing every single line yourself, you describe what you need in natural language and let the AI do the heavy lifting. You then review and refine what the AI produces, almost like being a director instead of a line by line coder. It's a more intuitive, iterative, and sometimes more relaxed way of coding where you guide the AI with your vibe rather than manually constructing everything yourself.
Thank you for the nice description. So basically, all these developments that it looks like, oh, AI can code. You can, instead of coding yourself, you can apparently direct AI to do it for you, made many people believe that the age of people coding is over because now AI is gonna do it for people, it's gonna do it faster and everything. So the field of software engineering is going to be totally changed now. Now, of course, we should mention one thing. What I said earlier is if you have a little code to write like 100 lines and you can sum up in one paragraph how what those 100 lines should do, then usually AI can spit it out in a few seconds. The thing is, of course, in software engineering, you have bigger pieces of code. You have big projects where you have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousand lines of code spread over multiple files, and no entity, no human AI can produce those in one go, but you have to work incrementally. You have to make changes, improvements, you fix bugs, add features, and you test it and so on. And it's a complicated thing to do for any person or AI to keep an overview over the whole project. And also if you have different people working on the project, you have each of them changing something. You want to have a copy of the project with all the changes. That's also complex. Um, so basically, software engineering is much more complicated than producing a few hundred lines of code or so. Yes, there was one study that tried to measure whether developers actually can get more productive on bigger projects when they use AI. Can you explain that study, Sayanko?
Absolutely. So let's talk about that study because it's a really interesting piece of the puzzle. Basically, this study looked at experienced software engineers working on open source projects and tried to measure whether using AI tools actually made them more productive when they were dealing with these larger, more complex code bases, not just those small 100-line snippets. What they found was pretty fascinating. Even though developers felt like they were more productive with the AI, the actual measured time to complete tasks didn't really decrease. In some cases, it even took longer. And that's because while AI is great at generating bits of code quickly, the real complexity in software engineering is in understanding the whole project, integrating changes, and managing all the dependencies and teamwork that go into a large code base. So the study showed that while AI can handle certain coding tasks almost instantly, the overall productivity gains on big projects aren't as straightforward as just saying AI codes for you. It's more complicated and it involves a lot of incremental, human driven guidance.
Thank you, Sayanka. Yes, so this study basically worked like that. I think they had 80 people who were working on open source projects, and they divided them into two groups, and they told all of them they should take one of the feature requests or bug fix requests they had for the projects and implement them. And they randomly assigned them into those two groups, where one group was told to do it without AI and the other group to do it with AI. And it turned out, so the group that used AI, when they asked them, so how was it? Were you more productive? They said, oh yes, we were. But the group that used AI was actually 19% slower on average than the group that didn't use AI. And that, of course, were used by a lot of skeptics to say, oh look, AI, yeah, it makes people just think they're more productive, but it's not really. By the way, Sanku, so do we know what kind of tools those people used in the study that used AI?
Yes, exactly, Sayanko. That's the heart of it. And you summed up the study perfectly. They had about 80 developers split into two groups, one working with AI assistance and the other working without it. When they measured the actual time it took to complete those tasks, the group using AI ended up about 19% slower on average. And yes, that's exactly the kind of result that gave skeptics a lot of fuel to say, hey, maybe AI isn't actually making developers faster. As for the tools they used, in that study, the developers who had AI assistants were mainly using an AI coding tool called Cursor Pro, which integrated a model from Anthropic called Claude, specifically the Claude Sonnet versions. So it wasn't just any AI, it was a specific tool that these developers were using to generate and refine code. So this kind of result doesn't mean AI can't be helpful. It just means the productivity boost isn't always as straightforward as it might seem, especially on larger projects.
Yes, thank you, Sanku. So Claude is one of the first tier models we talked about earlier, and Claude is the one that's usually the go-to choice for coding because it's basically trained especially for coding by making sure that it can work on large, complex data sets and also works fairly precise and reliable compared to other projects. So it's one of the go-to tools for coding. It should be noted, of course, those people who do open source projects, it means it's their own project. They are very familiar with how it works. They usually work on something they're personally interested in. They usually use the tools they like the most. For example, I mean, if I would work on a open source project, obviously, I would pick one where I can use my favorite language, which is Rust. So those developers, they were of course among the best people for that task. And they had some experience with AI, but it was perhaps a little bit limited. They could have more. So basically, you see, there's a lot of, so whether AI makes you faster depends on a lot of things. So Sayanku, what experience have people reported since then?
Exactly, Sayanko. You've highlighted the key nuances really well. So the developers in that study were indeed working on their own familiar open source projects in languages they were comfortable with, and they were already quite skilled. That means the baseline was already high. And as you said, their experience with AI tools like Claude was there, but it wasn't necessarily deep or long term. They were still getting used to integrating AI into their workflow. Now, in terms of what people have reported since then, it's been a mix. Some developers, especially those who have had more time to get comfortable with AI tools, do report that they're seeing productivity gains on bigger projects. They've learned how to use AI more effectively as a collaborative tool, kind of like a coding partner rather than a magic solution. They found that once they really understand how to steer the AI and where it's most helpful, it can save them time on repetitive tasks, help with brainstorming, or generate boilerplate code. But it's not a one size fits all boost. It depends a lot on the project and the developer's familiarity with the AI. So, in short, as developers get more experience with these tools, some do find real productivity benefits. But it's a gradual process and it really varies by individual and their project. It's not just an overnight transformation.
Thank you, Sayanko. So yes, how successful you are with AI depends on a number of things, of course. It depends on how good the AI is that you're using. It depends on how good you as a person are familiar with how to use the AI and also the tools you use, how you can integrate it in your development environment and so on. And these are all things that, of course, are in development. So you see, people reported that they are more productive. Of course, the key question, was it again just developers saying they're more productive, or do we have some better evidence that they actually were?
Exactly, Sayanku. That's really the heart of it. It's a combination of factors: how good the AI is, how familiar the developer is with using it, how well it integrates into their existing tools and workflows, and so on. And yes, that's all still evolving. People are learning and the tools are improving. Now, as for whether we have better evidence beyond just developers saying they feel more productive, we do have some emerging data. There are a few longitudinal studies and company reports that look at team level metrics, like how long it takes for new developers to ramp up with AI tools, or how the overall cycle times on projects change. Some companies have started reporting that after an initial learning period, they do see real improvements in things like reducing the time spent on repetitive coding tasks or making it easier for teams to maintain large code bases. These are more objective metrics that go beyond just how developers feel. So while we're still building that evidence base, we are starting to see more concrete signs that yes, AI can lead to real productivity gains. It just takes time, adaptation, and the right kind of integration.
Thank you, Sayanka. So the summary basically is, yes, the productivity is real. We have really plenty of data on that, but also it's perhaps not how many people thought. Like those people who thought we're all gonna stop coding and leave it to AI, didn't happen. And also maybe people who thought, oh yeah, now with AI we're gonna be 10 times as fast, which is easy to think if because small programs work so well and it gets really challenging when the projects get bigger. But yes, so the large productivity gains that many people hoped of being maybe twice as fast or whatever, that didn't happen, but the gains are real, right, Sianku?
Yes, that's exactly it, Sayanku. You summed it up perfectly. The productivity gains are real, and we do have growing evidence to back that up. But it's definitely not the kind of overnight revolution where everyone just stops coding and hands everything over to AI. Instead, it's more of a gradual, nuanced improvement. The really big leaps some people imagined, like being 10 times faster, haven't materialized. But developers are still finding that with time and experience, AI can help them work more smoothly and take some of the load off repetitive or boilerplate tasks. So, yes, the gains are real, just a bit more modest and nuanced than some of the early hype suggested.
Yeah, thank you, Sanka. It's also, yeah, AI is also doing a lot of the tasks that developers often dread to do because they're boring, such as creating tests or creating documentation. So in general, developers are really happy that they can use AI, right?
Absolutely, Sayanku. That's a really great point. One of the big wins with AI is that it can take over those mundane, repetitive tasks the developers often don't enjoy, like writing unit tests, generating documentation, or setting up boilerplate code. It frees them up to focus on more interesting, creative parts of development, the parts they actually love doing. So even if the overall productivity gains aren't always massive, the quality of life improvement for developers is definitely a big deal. In that sense, a lot of developers are genuinely happy to have AI as a tool in their toolkit because it lets them spend more time on the parts of coding they actually enjoy.
Thank you, Sanko. Can you give a few concrete examples where people have said that they're more productive?
Of course, Sayanku. I'd love to share a few concrete examples. So, for instance, some developers have reported that using AI tools like GitHub Copilot or Claude in their integrated development environments really helps them speed up writing standard functions, boilerplate code, or common design patterns. They've mentioned that what used to take them an hour or two can sometimes be done in half the time because the AI suggests a solid starting point that they can then customize. Another example is in the area of testing. Developers have said that having an AI generate the initial draft of unit tests or documentation means they're much more likely to actually do it because it takes away that initial friction of starting from scratch. It's like having a helpful assistant who drafts the boring parts so they can focus on the interesting bits. And finally, some teams have said that AI helps them onboard new developers faster. New team members can ask the AI for explanations of unfamiliar parts of the code base or get quick examples, which makes the whole learning curve a bit smoother. So those are a few real world scenarios where developers have genuinely felt and seen productivity improvements.
Thank you, Sayanku. So we also we had earlier some concrete examples of companies that reported that they are more productive. Can you tell us more about which companies those were and what they said?
Absolutely, Sayanku. We did touch on some real company examples earlier, so let me share a bit more about those. One of the companies we mentioned was Zoho, whose founder Sridhar Vembu has publicly said that using AI coding tools helped their developers ship features in a fraction of the time it used to take, sometimes turning weeks of work into days. That's a pretty strong endorsement from a company that's deeply involved in software development. Another example is JP Morgan Chase, whose CIO Lori Beer mentioned that their internal AI coding assistants increased their software engineers' efficiency by up to 20%. That's a significant claim from a major financial institution that relies heavily on software. And we also talked about how Bank of America reported that AI tools help them cut down software testing times by up to 90% in some cases, which is a huge productivity gain and a very time consuming part of the development process. These are all real world examples from companies that have gone on record saying that AI has made a measurable difference in their productivity. So while the gains might not always be as dramatic as some people hoped, there's definitely solid evidence that companies are seeing real benefits.
Thank you, Sayanko. Yes, these are good examples. So yes, so basically, okay, yeah, we're still coding. We didn't get as much faster as some people thought we would, but there are some gains, and of course they depend on what you're doing, what kind of task we are talking about, and so on. Yes, Sayanko. Is there anything else we should mention?
I think that's a really nice summary, Seonku. And I guess the last thing to mention is just that this is an evolving field. As AI tools get better and as developers get more comfortable using them, we might see those gains grow over time. It's not a finished story, and it'll be interesting to see how things continue to develop. But for now, I think we've covered the key points really well. AI is a helpful tool, it can make developers' lives easier, and it does bring some real productivity benefits, even if it's not a total game changer just yet. Thanks for a great conversation.
Well, thank you, Sayanko, for the great conversation. So, to all of our viewers, thank you much for tuning in. We hope you liked the show and learned something. Please like, subscribe, leave comments, happy ones or not happy ones, and please tell us what else you want us to talk about. So, thank you for joining and see you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. We really hope you enjoyed today's talk. Definitely let us know your thoughts and what topics you'd like to hear next time. We always love your feedback. So until then, take care and see you soon.